Alright, so today we're diving into a really powerful and honestly provocative critique of Black theology. It's all drawn from the work of the scholar ThT Itumeleng Makale, and it really boils down to this one central challenging question. Is this whole theological movement a true path to liberation, or is it something else entirely? So let's just get right into it. The core question the author is asking is this: is Black theology a genuinely new spiritual path, or is it maybe just a clever disguise, one that continues the legacy it claims it's fighting against? That's the real tension we're going to unpack here. And this quote, this is the key to the entire argument. The author uses this incredible metaphor of painting a white gaze with black paint. Think about it. The idea is that the underlying structure, the gaze itself, doesn't change at all, even if you change its color on the surface. So what does that really mean in practice? To really get what the author is saying, we have to start at the very beginning with the foundational problem they identify. It's a concept called cognitive dislocation. And as you'll see, this isn't just about theology. It's about a really fundamental state of being. So what on earth is cognitive dislocation? Well, the source defines it as this profound uprooting. It's like losing your own cultural and spiritual map. Imagine your primary frame of reference is just gone. How do you define yourself? How do you find your place in the world? The author argues that this is the core wound that any true liberation has to heal. And the author makes this idea really concrete with a powerful analogy. Think about trying to separate the good part of a plant, the kernel, from its outer layer, the husk. The argument here is that trying to do this with a foreign cultural system, like saying, let's just keep the good parts of a colonial religion, is actually a symptom of this very dislocation. You're still working with someone else's plant, you know? Okay, so how does this critique apply to the actual pioneers of Black theology? Well, the author examines their work as this profound, sincere attempt to fix Christianity from the inside. So here you see the perspective of Professor Itumeleng. His approach is basically to take the Bible and clean it up, to get rid of what he calls the noisy data. The whole point is to liberate the book itself, so that it can then become a tool for liberating people. It's a project of reclamation. And this is a perfect example of that painting metaphor we started with. James Cone, who's often called the father of Black liberation theology, re-envisions Christ as Black. In his view, Jesus actually takes on the quality of Blackness and the suffering that comes with it. This recentering of the divine in the Black experience is an absolute cornerstone of the movement. But here's the sharp counterpoint from our source material. The author argues that these very acts, cleaning the book, painting the Savior black, they don't actually break the chains. Instead, by working within that foreign framework, they might inadvertently be helping to tighten them, reinforcing that original cognitive dislocation. Now, this brings us to a really complex and central figure in this whole debate, Steve Biko. The author presents Biko's engagement with Christianity as a deep paradox, even calling his attempts to reform it a delusional exercise. So let's break this down. See, on one hand, Biko laid out this incredibly ambitious agenda to fundamentally change Christianity. He wasn't talking about small tweaks. He was talking about getting rid of the rotten foundation, redefining the entire message of the Bible to make it relevant for the masses, and adapting it to local culture. This was a radical attempt to reshape the faith from the inside out. But then, on the other hand, the very same Biko offered this absolutely devastating critique of the religion. He called it a, quote, cold, cruel religion that used the fear of hell to destroy indigenous cultural values. So the big question is, how can one person hold both of these views at the same time? And here you see that paradox in stark contrast. On the left, you've got Biko the reformer, who wants to adapt Christianity. On the right, you've got Biko the critic, calling it a cold, cruel religion that destroyed his people's values. The author points to this internal conflict as the ultimate example of cognitive dislocation in action. This paradox leads us to the author's final and most radical point. If reforming the structure from within is just a trap, what's the alternative? Well, the argument now shifts to deconstructing the very foundation, starting with the concept of the church itself. The author's position is completely uncompromising. The argument is that the very idea of an African-centered church is a cosmological impossibility. But why? The reason, according to the author, is that the institution itself originates from a worldview that is completely alien to African spiritual cosmology. To prove this, the author traces the word church all the way back to its roots. It comes from the Greek kyriakon, which means the house of the Kyrios. And the Kyrios? That was the male head, the patriarch of a Greek household. The point being made here is that the very DNA of the word and the institution it represents is tied to a specific non-African patriarchal structure. And so, we arrive at the author's final conclusion. If the framework itself is the root of the problem, then simply painting it a different color can never be the solution. According to this critique, true spiritual liberation doesn't come from reform. It requires completely abandoning these form structures to reclaim an authentic, autonomous frame of reference. And that leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful question to consider. It really encapsulates the entire debate we've just explored. Can a tool that was instrumental in colonization and subjugation ever be repurposed to build something truly free? That's the challenge posed by this critique, and it's something worth thinking about.